Okay, we're looking at topic 7 for the reassessment practice. And the first one says, which pair of statements accurately describe the angle relationships depicted in the diagram below? So we're looking for which one of these is correct. 1 and 14 are alternate interior angles. They are not. They're exterior. They're alternate sides, but they are exterior. So we know it's not A. So B says angle 4 and 5 are alternate exterior angles. So let's look at 4 and 5. They would be alternate exteriors if we're looking at these being our parallel lines and that being our transversal. They are alternate exterior. And then it's also asking that 6 and 7 are corresponding. Those are not corresponding. Corresponding angles have to be in the same position. So if we had an angle here, to make it corresponding, it would go down the transversal and end up there where 8 is. So we see that number 2 is also not correct. Number 3 is 6 and 11 are same side interiors. So we have 6 and 11, those would be same side interiors. And 7 and 8 form a linear pair. So 6 and 11 are not interior or same side. If A and B were the parallel lines, that would be the transversal, and 11 is not on it. And if the other lines, C and D, were parallel, then this would be a transversal, and the other angle is not on it. So that's why those are wrong. That leaves D as the correct answer, and let's just make sure that it is correct. So it says 11 and 16 are vertical. That is true. They're opposite from each other. And 2 and 14, so we have angle 2, and we have angle 14. They are same side exterior. They're on the same side of the transversal, and they're exterior to the other 2 lines. Okay? And number 2, we're told that T is a transversal. We want to know which of the following determines that M and N are parallel. So if 2 is equivalent to 3, we know that's true. They're vertical, but that doesn't have anything to do with them being parallel. That's only about those 2 angles that we are looking at. What if 5 and 8 are parallel? Same thing. Vertical angles, they're not telling us anything about the other line to see if it's parallel or not. Okay, angle 3 and angle 8 are supplementary. That could be. They do need to be supplementary if it is parallel. We'd have to put together 2 different steps to get there. So we would say that, we could say 3 and 8, 3 and 7 are corresponding, they have to equal the same, and then 7 and 8 are linear pair, and they become supplementary. So that is our answer. Question D, or answer choice D, talks about complementary, which wouldn't prove that they are parallel at all. And number 3 says that Sally's using strings to mark parallel rows for a vegetable garden behind her house. If the measure of angle 1 is 115, so the first thing I'm going to do is label angle 1 as 115. What should the measure be of angle 2? So if you look at this, we have parallel strings, we're told they're parallel, and a transversal. So we have to figure out what's the relationship between 1 and 2. They would be same side, and they're both exterior. What we know about same side exterior is that they add to 180. So if we start with 115, we would have to add 65 to it to get to 180. And number 4, we have assuming angle 4 is equivalent to angle 5. So we're told this, angle 4 and angle 5 are equivalent. So, what can we tell here? If we were to look at our parallel lines here, and our transversal here, we would now have opposite side exterior angles, and we would know that A and B are congruent. The reason we're using the converse of the alternate exterior angles is because we're using it to prove that they're parallel. That's when we use the converse, or the theorem going the opposite way. Okay. Let's turn the page and look at number 5. For what value of x is line L parallel to line M in this figure? We're again using the converses. We have two angles here. We need to know whether they should add together or they should equal each other. We can do, come down here, x would be corresponding to it, and then, x would be here corresponding to it, and then we know that they make 180. So we could write our equation as x plus 48 equals 180. When we solve, we get x equals 132. You could have also done this very easily if you remembered to do your stars and dots. So if you had drawn your picture to start with and you did stars, where you have all the equivalent obtuse angles, and dots where you have the equivalent acute angles, you would notice you were dealing with a star and a dot. And you know that when you have both, they add to 180, just like we did with the relationships. Okay, number 6 just involves looking at things a little bit differently. Our answer here, we're going to look at C, D, and E, F. So we're looking at C, D, and E, F. They're skew. They are not skew. Those are actually parallel. I know they're on different faces of that cube, but if you were to make a diagonal plane through it, they would be on the same plane, which would make them parallel. So since they're not skew, A is wrong. So for B, we have CG, which is here, and FH, which is here. They are skew. That's true, they are. They're never going to intersect, but they're not parallel. And then we also, to make this one true, we also have to satisfy AC, which is here, and CG, which is here, that they need to be perpendicular. They are perpendicular. They are, okay. These are perpendicular. They would be the side of that face of the box. So B would be your answer. Okay. Let's look at number 7. Which actually, don't look at it. We're going to skip it. It's not going to help you with your reassessment at all. So in this figure, 2 lines are cut by a transversal. Now, even though the lines don't look parallel, we can still have a transversal. Transversal just means that it intersects 2 lines. Which of the following terms describes the angle pair relationship that exists between 1 and 2? So we have angle 1 and angle 2. Corresponding angles are when you move down the transversal and they stay in the same position. So 1 is in the upper left and 2 would be in the upper left, makes those corresponding. They're not congruent to each other unless those lines are parallel, but they're still called corresponding angles. Number 9. Line P is the transversal. It's the one cutting across all of the other lines. The lines Q, R, S, and T, which is not parallel to the other 3. So we need to look for angle relationships here. If we were to compare Q and R, we would need 105 and 75 to add together to give us 180, which they do. So Q and R are parallel. What about R and S? If we were to compare R and S, we would go off of corresponding angles. We would have 75 and 85. So these two are not parallel. We don't know which one isn't for now. Right? And then if we were to compare S and T, they should add up to 180 and they add up to 190, which means that they are not parallel. If we were to compare Q and T, we have 105 and 105, they are parallel. So what's in common with our ones that are not parallel is side S, and that is our answer. Okay. Last one here is 10. LM and N are intersected by a transversal. Which of the following statements about lines LM and N must be true? So, are they all parallel? If they are, we'd have to have the correct relationships going on here. We would have to have 46 and 48 being the same, because those are corresponding angles. Because they're not, we know that M and N are not parallel, so it is not D. We know M and N are not parallel. We know all three are not if M and N aren't. So now we're going to focus on answer choices B and C. Are L and M parallel? So we're looking at these two here. So if we look at our transversal here, we would be looking at angles that should add up to 180. 132 would come here to be corresponding, and then they would add up to. We'll do 46 and 132 add up to 180. They do not. So we know that those two are not parallel, which leaves L and N, and let's just double check that L and N are parallel. So L and N are the top and the bottom lines, and we should have two angles here that should add up to 180. Do 138 and 48 add up to 180? Yes. So we checked that those are parallel.